All right, so welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our ORCID US Community 2025 annual member meeting today. Just a few notes before we start. Please use the chat if you have any questions or comments that you would like to contribute, at least for this first hour portion before we go into discussion. Everyone is muted with their video off, so the chat is the best way to communicate. There is a live transcript available through Zoom if you'd like to use that, and we are recording this session. The recording and slides will be shared afterwards. So this is our ORCID US Community 2025 member meeting. Thank you everyone for taking time out of your day to join us. So welcome. My name is Sheila Rabin. I'm the lead strategist for research infrastructure programs at Lyrasis, and that includes our ORCID US Community. We also have a data site consortium, and I'm also working on a pilot of RAID, which is another persistent identifier for research projects. We also have my colleague Paolo Guhilde. He's our senior strategist for the ORCID US Community, and Kayla Ramhit, our program specialist for the ORCID US Community. So many of you already know us. We also have Shauna Sadler on the call with us today from ORCID. She's our engagement manager for outreach and partnerships, and she's our primary liaison at the ORCID organization. And we also have a special guest speaker today, Carly Robinson. She's a senior policy fellow at Spark, and we've actually been working with Carly for several years, especially in her former role with the running the US government ORCID consortium. So our agenda for today, we're going to have a quick little icebreaker here at the beginning, and then we'll hear from Carly with an update on ORCID and US federal government policies and what's going on there. Then we'll do our ORCID US Community updates. We will do our ORCID US Community Awards, very exciting, and then we'll have a prize drawing at the top of the hour. And then anyone who wants to stay on for an additional 30 minutes for a guided discussion with us is welcome to do so, but that's also optional if you have to leave after the hour. So let's start with a little icebreaker. And of course, everyone is welcome to introduce themselves in the chat so you can see who else is here. But for our icebreaker, we have essentially 3 questions, ORCID-related questions, and we will each ask a question and everyone will put their answers in the chat. There's no prize for this, but whoever gets the closest answer to what the actual answer is will get a round of applause from everyone. So let's get started. The first question, and you can just take your best guess by putting your answer in the chat. How many ORCID IDs are currently affiliated with the United States, or at least the ORCID record says that the person is in the United States? Let's take a minute for people to get their best guess in the chat. I'm seeing anywhere from 4,000 or 42 to 10 million and anywhere in between. All right, get those answers in and I will reveal what the actual answer is. Are there any final guesses from the group? Somewhere over 1 million. That's a pretty good guess. Let's see what the actual answer is. 1.6 million. So I'm not sure. We have several guesses that are close. I see a 1.8 million, a 1.37. The 10 million, I really wish that was the case someday. So that's the answer to the first one, right? We could say close enough without going over. So great job on these guesses. That was a hard one. But now we all kind of have somewhat of an idea of how many ORCID IDs or ORCID records say that they are in the United States. All right, let's go on to the next question. Kayla, I think this is yours to ask.
Yeah, so our next question, what type of work is most commonly written to ORCID records from ORCID US member organizations? So we'll take a minute to get answers in the chat. Seeing journal articles, publications, screenplay.
Really, really good guesses here.
Yeah.
All right, are we ready to see what the final answer is? And note, this is just for the works section. So the type of work that's most commonly added. All right, let's see what the answer is. It's journal articles. So 66% of all of the works that are written to researchers' ORCID records from ORCID US community member organizations are journal articles. So lots of people won that one. Lots of people asked articles. Good job. Okay, let's go to the third question.
All right. All right. Okay. So the third question, this is going to be specific. Which ORCID US member organization has updated the most ORCID records this year? Okay, all right. We have Harvard. Any other guesses? Okay, good guesses. Yeah, UCLA, MIT, Johns Hopkins, Cornell.
Lots of the larger universities,
Uh-huh.
which are really good guesses.
Michigan.
Any last minute guesses before we reveal the answer? All right, let's see what the actual answer is. It's the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory through the NASA Astrophysics Data System. Maybe many of you didn't know that the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory is actually one of our ORCID US community members. And if you're familiar with the NASA Astrophysics Data System, you know that researchers can go in and they can claim their works to their ORCID record. So yeah, if you didn't know that, now you know, and we're always learning new things. All right, so thanks everyone for participating in that icebreaker. Hopefully that was fun and kind of got your brains thinking. Um, I'm going to hand it over to Paolo now.
Great, thank you, Sheila. So again, welcome everyone. One of the things that we've been working on the past few months is this ORCID in the US webpage. And we are very excited to launch this. I think this is available now for you all today. So ORCID in the US webpage, basically just kind of information about what's going on about ORCID within our community, but as well as the entire country of the US, of course. So you'll find information about the different consortia here. So you have the ORCID US community, but there's also another consortium in the US, which is the US federal government. We also have information about ORCID US federal policies that links out to our blog posts. Um, and of course, there's information about the ORCID US community statistics. So in the last few years, we've been gathering all of these statistics that are primarily just kind of internal information that we gather, but now we're putting that out for everyone to take a look, and you'll have another page there on the statistics. And we also have links to community case studies. So if you have time, please take a look at it, and we'll definitely excited to hear about what you think of it and any feedback that you may have. So please check it out. All right, on the next slide. Great, thank you. So here, we are going to welcome our special guest for today. So our special guest is Dr. Carly Robinson. So you've heard Sheila talking about Carly earlier. So Dr. Robinson is a senior policy fellow at Spark. She has in-depth knowledge and experience shaping the federal policies related to PIDs and public access. Dr. Robinson is the former Assistant Director of the Office of Information Products and Services at the U.S. Department of Energy, the Office of Scientific and Technical Information, or OSTE. This particular office, Carly's office, oversaw the U.S. government ORCID consortium. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Carly.
Great. Thank you so much. It's great to be with you all today. I'm going to briefly share my slides. Hopefully that looks okay. Wonderful. So I'm very excited to give an update on kind of the work that's happening within the federal government around persistent identifiers. I think you all are very familiar with these memos and policies at this point that kind of talk about persistent identifiers. The first is National Security Presidential Memo number 33, which really focuses on persistent identifiers for people. And then the second is the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, or OSTP's public access memo. And this talks more broadly about persistent identifiers, not only for people, but also for research outputs, for organizations, and for awards. Now, for NSPM-33 implementation, that is supposed to be in effect right now. That's kind of the dates in the policy, but that's something that agencies are still working to implement. So I'll provide some updates there. For the requirements in the OSTP memo, agencies have until the end of 2027 to implement, but there are a number of agencies that actually have already rolled out some of their policies. So in addition to those two memos, you may be familiar with a memo that came out more recently under this administration. It's the Restoring Gold Standard Science memo. And this administration put this memo out saying that it's to ensure that the government is performing and funding high quality research. And part of this memo instructed the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy to issue additional implementation guidance for what agencies do to make sure that they are meeting this gold standard science. And so OSTP did issue that guidance a month later, and within that, it includes kind of 9 tenets or 9 ideas for kind of what constitutes gold standard science. And so some of these things are things like reproducibility, transparency, communicating null results, having unbiased peer review, things like that. And as this guidance came out, agencies were required to develop a plan or a report for how they will implement gold standard science. The reason that I'm talking about this is because a lot of agencies kind of took this as an opportunity to reframe their public access and persistent identifier implementation away from kind of previous administration priorities and to reframe it in this administration's priorities. And so when agencies were developing these gold standard science plans, they talked about public access and persistent identifiers kind of under this new banner. And I just wanted to kind of highlight visually how many agencies within their gold standard science implementation plans are talking about public access and then a few specifically persistent identifiers. So, I think this is a really good representation. NSF, NIH, DOE, NASA, and I think it was 14 agencies in total talk about public access and kind of the importance of public access for implementing gold standard science. And then 6 agencies specifically called out persistent identifiers as being key. So Department of Education, Department of Energy, NOAA, USDA, and then maybe a couple that you may not have thought would, Census and Department of Justice, which was really interesting. And I'll note that just because an agency doesn't talk about public access or persistent identifiers in their gold standard science plan doesn't mean that it's not still a priority. But this was just an opportunity for some agencies to kind of raise it to this level, which is really great to see. So I do want to kind of get into some of the specifics, the requirements that agencies already have in place around persistent identifiers, but also talk about some of the kind of upcoming requirements that we know are coming, because agencies might have policies that they have put out, but they are not yet effective. And some of these you are probably already very familiar with. You've heard it probably from numerous webcasts from Lyrasis and ORCID, but I just wanted to kind of put all of this information in one place. And I will say I'm primarily focusing on persistent identifiers for people and persistent identifiers for outputs, so ORCID IDs and DOIs. And the reason that I focused on these is because these often require a researcher to take action, as opposed to some of the other PID requirements like persistent identifiers for organizations, where agencies are kind of working on that implementation, but it's more work that they have to do as opposed to asking, researchers or external folks to kind of provide that information. So, first, looking at persistent identifiers for people or ORCID IDs, which will be used for the implementation in all of these cases. There are different points within the research lifecycle where these requirements come into place. A lot of them overlap, but I wanted to kind of call out these four different areas where you'll see requirements for people for ORCID IDs. The first is with the application. And the most common place that we're seeing this is NSPM-33 implementation, and that's within the common forms, the biographical sketch and the current and pending other support forms, where there is an expectation to include persistent identifiers for senior key personnel. So this is already a requirement for Department of Energy. And this is optional in forms for Department of Education, National Institutes of Health, and NSF. Another place that's interesting that you see this requirement for persistent identifiers for individuals with the application is at FDA. They have a requirement in their data management plan requirements that for those people that are performing extramural research, you're expected to provide their ORCID ID in the data management plan. So that's something that is kind of unique to FDA at this point. I haven't seen it from any other agencies, but it's great that they're including it somewhere else kind of in that application process. Now, there are some agencies that now just have a general requirement saying that any grantee, any awardee needs to have a persistent identifier for themselves. So this is happening at Department of Energy, where it says that any people that are conducting R&D or anyone that's using one of the DOE user facilities, things like the supercomputers, the light sources, neutron sources, have to have a persistent identifier for themselves, an ORCID ID. For Department of Education, it's all key personnel. For EPA, all individuals conducting research need to have a persistent identifier for themselves. For USDA, it's all authors. And for NASA, they focus just on requirements in their Science Mission Directorate right now. So that's, I believe, 70% of all extramural funding comes from the Science Mission Directorate. So that's a large portion of the research that NASA funds. And so all those agencies kind of have a general requirement that you need to have a persistent identifier for yourselves, an ORCID ID. And then some agencies now are also kind of implementing expectations from the OSTP memo, which is where you have a persistent identifier for the authors associated with R&D outputs. For DOE, basically all different types of outputs, you need to have ORCID IDs for the DOE funded authors. For Department of Transportation, the requirement is for publications and reports. And then for EPA and USDA, it's specifically for publications and data. Now, one other place that agencies are kind of collecting this information are within various kind of reporting systems. So within the Department of Energy, specifically in the Office of Science, which is the basic research funding office at Department of Energy, in their PAMS system, they are collecting ORCID IDs. At NIH, they collect ORCID IDs in ERA Commons, which is their kind of award grants management system. And it's actually required for those applying for fellowships, for career development, and for trainee awards. And then USDA is also collecting it kind of where they collect their researcher profiles. You can include your ORCID ID there as well. So these are all of the requirements that are in place now, but looking forward, we know that more requirements are coming. Big thank you to Shauna, who has shared a lot of kind of what she's been hearing as well in some of this kind of upcoming for the common forms. Our understanding is that DoD, NSF, and USDA will have requirements for persistent identifiers for the senior key personnel in those common forms. NIH, we knew that this was coming, but they just released their kind of policy saying that ORCID IDs specifically will now be required in the common forms starting January 25th. I will say for NSF, we've been waiting for NSF to put out their PAPG, which is their, proposal and award guide, because we were expecting requirements around persistent identifiers in the common forms there. That actually just came out last night. It's only a partial update to the PAPG, and as of right now, I'm not seeing those requirements in there like we expected, but it's possible that NSF might do another update soon. So we've reached out to NSF to try to get some clarification and see if we can find out kind of when those requirements, when we should expect those. Now, there are a couple other agencies that have kind of policies that are out but are not in full implementation yet. So, for example, Census, they have requirements for persistent identifiers for grantees, for awardees, but they will be in effect at the end of 2027. That's consistent with the OSTP memo requirements. The CPSC, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, they also have a policy out saying that by the end of this year, so starting in 2026, for any publications or data outputs, the authors will have to have ORCID IDs associated with them. I already mentioned ERA Commons, where NIH collects ORCID IDs. So starting January 25th, it will also be a requirement, in addition to having ORCID IDs in the common forms, it'll be a requirement to have it in ERA Commons as well. Switching gears now to persistent identifiers for outputs, which is primarily DOIs at this point in policies. There are kind of three different areas where there are requirements. One is for publication results, research outputs. One is for data, and the other is for other types of research outputs. So currently, for these agencies, these requirements are in effect. So for Department of Energy, EPA, and USDA, they all require that kind of the journal article publications that are submitted under, the public access requirements have an associated DOI. For research data, HRQ, which is the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, DOE, EPA, IMLS, NASA Science Mission Directorate, and USDA all say that data outputs need to have a DOI associated with them. Some of these agencies will assign DOIs themselves if that record is submitted to the agency and a DOI is not already assigned. Some kind of have expectations that that DOI will be assigned by like the data repository that's hosting that data. And then some agencies have requirements for other research outputs. So for Department of Energy, their reports, like technical reports and scientific software, have to have DOIs assigned to them or persistent identifiers assigned to them. And if a DOI or persistent identifier is not already assigned, DOE will assign one for the authors. And then at Science Mission Directorate and NASA, they also have a requirement around persistent identifiers for software. Now, looking forward, again, there are some agencies where we know policies are coming up. So for publications, again, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, Census, and Department of Justice will all require persistent identifiers for publications. That'll go into effect for CPSC at the end of this year, for Census at the end of 2027. For Department of Justice, they have said that this will be a requirement, but they haven't given any implementation date. So that's something that we are kind of looking at and keep following. And then for research data, there's a lot coming up. So ACF, the Administration for Children and Families, ACL, the Administration for Community Living, CPSC, Census, and DOJ, again, with kind of various implementation dates, but all of that is consistent with the expectations from the OSTP memo. So with that, I'm not sure if we have any time for questions now or if we'll wait, but just really appreciate the opportunity to share with you all. And yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks, Carly. We do have about a few minutes. If anybody does have any questions, please put those into the chat if you do have a question for Carly.
And as Paulo said, the slides will be available. I know that was a lot of information very quickly. And please feel free to reach out to me afterwards. I put my email address in the slides. I can also put it in the chat.
We do have one question. Yes.
Yeah, so NIH is not currently requiring DOIs. So they don't have kind of an overarching policy for DOIs at this point. There are some of the kind of institutes do have repositories where if you deposit in that repository, they will assign a DOI. NIH has a DataCite membership and they actually run a DataCite consortium, and DOE in my previous role, we actually kind of ran that consortium for NIH. So NIH is working to get all of their institutes, their IOCs to be a part of that consortium and start assigning DOIs. But yeah, as of right now, there's not kind of an overarching policy around that. They also, historically have used accession numbers in a lot of their repositories. So I think there's conversations happening with those communities as well, because those accession numbers are kind of highly used.
Thanks, Carly. I'm seeing a few other comments in the chat. Everyone, please feel free to continue chatting in the chat. Will these tables be shared on the ORCID website, or are they already? That's a great question. The tables that Carly shared in her slides are ones that she created for the purpose of this presentation, so we can explore possibilities about how to make those publicly available. We do have on the ORCID US Community website, and we'll share the link to it shortly. We have a link to basically a Google Doc that tries to keep track of all of this. But if y'all are finding the table view helpful, just let us know in the chat, and we can certainly look into adding something like that to the resources we have available. Okay, so we're going to move on to the ORCID US community updates now.
Thank you, Sheila. All right, so now we're going to do a little bit of a recap and some updates from the ORCID US community. Just kind of see what's going on, what happened this past year and what we can look forward to next year. All right, next slide, please. All right, so just a quick reminder for all of you all. Our newsletter just published this morning, so it is now available for you all for our December 2025 newsletter. So please check it out. We will also like to remind you of our annual survey. The deadline to fill it out is December 31st, 2025. So that's the end of this month. The annual survey is really a good thing for us to have, so we can plan what's going to be coming up for next year, what kind of events, what kind of webinars we should be doing, as well as resources to kind of create and work with you all. So please, if you have time, please fill it out. On the next slide. So on the next slide, we are going to welcome our new members this year. We currently have 14 new members for 2025. So you can kind of see that it's broken down to quarters. We are very excited to get new members this year, especially with what's going on with federal policies and all of the things that's happening. So kudos to everyone and welcome to our new members from from publication kind of agencies as well as universities and other institutions. So welcome all. Next slide. This past year, we had quite a few of webinars and online events as well, so you can kind of see what's going on here. Some of the events that we did includes ORCID Workshop for Researchers, which we revamped a little bit this year. We will also kind of work on that for next year to kind of revamp it and make it even better for you all. We also did we did some next steps conversations as well as webinars this year as well. So on this slide and the next slide, we will see this kind of events as well as the following slide, which our most recent kind of event happened in November, which is the Funders in the Research Ecosystem, and that one was very well attended. You can see all of our events upcoming as well as links to the recordings on our events page. So if you take a look at that, you should see it, what's the recording links as well as other resources related to our online events. But just to kind of recap, we had about 13 online events this past year with that about 1,400 registrants and basically 50% total attendees. So exciting. I know this year, it's kind of a little bit overwhelming for a lot of folks, so it's really good to see some engagement from our community. All right, on the next slide, we are going to recap a little bit of what we did as well. So we attended quite a lot of conferences last year, and we were also invited to do some presentations with our member organizations. So we did some online presentations as well as presentations when we did site visits. So we visited some of the organizations this year, and we did some presentations for them as well. So if this is something that you would like us to do, to collaborate with us with conferences, or we just happen to be the conference at your location, we would love to visit and talk to you in person as well. On the next slide, we have some new resources this past year. So we did quite a lot of new resources. One of the first thing that came out earlier this year is actually the revamp of the Getting Started with ORCID. So we created a series of videos for you all. So this was meant essentially for new ORCID members. However, this is also very kind of important and also relevant to anyone that just want to get a refresh on their ORCID kind of membership to get an idea of what's going on, just to get the basics and the foundations of ORCID. So please take a look at this. These are short videos that's available for everyone to watch. On the next slide, new resources as well. We've created about 9 new resources, and that includes blogs, guides this year. One of the things, of course, that we've kind of talked a little bit more about already today is the ORCID policies of U.S. Federal agencies. So Sheila talked a little bit about that we have a Google Doc where we compiled all of the policies related to PIDs as well as ORCID. So take a look at that and see if there are any things that you would like to know more about or things that would be helpful in this area. We would definitely like to hear from you. On the next slide, we have a new guide that we are working on. So this is the ORCID US guide for funders. And we are trying to get feedback from everyone to find out what they think of this guide as well as how we can make it better. So if you have any ideas or information about what we should include, what's needed, that sort of thing, so please let us know. Definitely give us your feedback. This is available now online, but we will publish it even better for next year. So if you have any other feedback on this, please let us know. All right, so on the next slide, some other community activities. This past year, we did about 13 integration reviews, and that include custom integrations with other with organizations that created or built their own ORCID integrations. And I believe we will hear more about this later on. But we also did integration reviews with non-service certified providers with ORCID. So these are some systems that have ORCID built-in integrations However, they are not certified service providers, so we still have to do integrations with them. So this includes Dataverse and digital measures or faculty success. So it's been kind of a busy year for everyone. On the next slide, we have some information about just integration activities across our community. So just numbers essentially on what our community are doing. So that includes like, the number of works that they've added to ORCID records. So that's over 2 million right there. Funding information, peer review activities, that sort of thing are available here as well. So these are just some of the numbers that you'll see. And these are also available in our reports as well. So the ORCID US community statistics that we talked about earlier, you'll have a link to this information. All right, on the next slide. So what's new with ORCID? A lot of things are kind of happening when it comes to ORCID, so kind of new functionalities and interface. One of the things that came out this year is the featured work, which essentially you can feature up to 5 works in your ORCID record. And this is just an example of that from my ORCID record. So you can add featured works there as well. On the next slide, a new ORCID work types as well were released this year, and that really is focusing more on the arts and humanities. So you can add creative works, for example, so that could be like images, design, moving image, or musical compositions. All of those things are now available where your researchers can add this information easily in their ORCID record. All right, on the next slide. So other improvements as well. So other systems out there are improving their ORCID kind of integrations. These are just some of the things that we know about. I'm sure there are more systems that are doing ORCID integrations, and we would love to hear more about them. But these are just some of the things that's happening out there. DataCite made some improvements in their search and link wizard, as well as Web of Science. I'm pretty sure probably a lot of you are excited with this kind of improvement with Web of Science. So check that out and see what you can find. I know that with Web of Science search and link wizard, you'll be able to make that connection easily within the search and link wizard and be able to have auto update as well in that particular system. All right, and I think finally on this next slide, DSpace, something to look forward to next year. Sheila Raven has been working a lot on DSpace this past few years, and this finally has come to kind of this really big kind of improvement to DSpace this year. So a lot of things are happening, and with that, DSpace is planning to undergo to be part of the ORCID certified service provider. Hopefully that's going to get done early next year. So we will have more announcement on this when it becomes available. So watch out for that. All right. And I think that's it for me, and I'll pass it back to Sheila.
Great, thanks, Paolo. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what to expect next year, which is 2026. We just did 2025, so let's go to the next slide. For 2025 is pretty much over from my perspective. It's been a good year. Thanks, Paolo, for that kind of overview of all the things that took place this year. So looking ahead to 2026, what can you expect? We will, as always, continue to work on improving our resources that are available through our ORCID US Community website. So we just shared with you today the new ORCID in the US webpage and also the statistics page. Those are new. So you can expect to continue to see improvements like that. And if you have any ideas for resources that would be helpful to you that we don't have yet, or things that you would like to see on the website, just let us know. We're open to feedback. We've been focusing a lot on ORCID in this community because this is the ORCID US community, but as time goes on, I think we're all realizing more and more that ORCID really works best, and we can get the most benefits from ORCID when we're using ORCID with other persistent identifiers across the research ecosystem. So Carly was speaking about ORCID and DOIs earlier. So we will continue to move the focus. Of course, we're always going to focus specifically on ORCID, but whenever it's relevant and makes sense, we'll be looking to frame conversations about ORCID within that broader ecosystem to make sure that everyone has a good understanding of how everything works together. A couple of years ago, we created some resources that anyone really can use to gather data from ORCID records and also from DOI metadata records and do some data visualizations. We ran into a few issues with those existing resources this year. We were starting to see some little bugs and errors pop up in the R script that we had. And so Kayla specifically has been working on improving our data visualization resources. And we've also started partnering with our counterparts in Canada at the Canadian Research Knowledge Network on these data visualization resources. So hopefully next year we'll have kind of a new and improved set of resources that we'll be able to share with everyone, and you will hear from us when those are available. And we're going to continue, as always, our community events throughout the year. We often do kind of towards the beginning of the calendar year, we do things about onboarding and kind of getting started with ORCID. And of course, as new organizations join our consortium, everyone gets onboarded. We will continue our next steps conversations, which are focused conversations on specific topics. So the topics that we identify for next year might not be applicable to everyone, but they might pertain to you specifically. And I will just highlight that if you fill out our survey, you can give us feedback on what kinds of topics you would like to discuss, and we can consider those for potentially a next steps conversation. We also have our community calls. Those are kind of more broad topics that we all share and discuss. Webinars are kind of the more formal training and just getting information out there. And of course, our ORCID workshops for researchers have just continued to be so popular. We've been getting a lot of registrations for those, and we've been doing them quarterly throughout the year. So we're going to just continue to do that because it seems like it's really benefiting people. But again, fill out our survey and you can give some of your input as to what kinds of topics and what kinds of opportunities you'd like to see for this coming year. If we go to the next slide. For member communications, many of you are already familiar with these things, but just as a reminder, we do have a couple of different communication channels for everyone. So we have our ORCID US listserv, which is a Google group. That's primarily for us to share announcements about events and things that are going on. We also have a little Slack channel that's part of the Friends of ORCID Slack group. We have a US community channel there, and that can be a place for more discussion if anybody has questions or comments and things that they just want to share with others in the group. If you're not already signed up to the listserv or Slack and you would like to be, Paolo just shared a link in the chat where you can fill out this form and we'll add you. And of course, our annual survey is the best place to give your feedback, but we also love to hear from everyone throughout the year. So contact us anytime at orcidus@lyrasis.org. And then every year in the summer months, you will hear from us with an email where we check in with you, encourage you to check your contacts, make sure all of your contacts for ORCID at your organization are accurate. And we also provide some general recommendations for next steps that you can take in your ORCID adoption journey. And then, of course, if you want more kind of personalized feedback and consultation, again, just email us. We're more than happy to meet one-on-one with all of you at any time. And then, of course, our renewals always take place in the fall. Thank you, everyone, for getting your renewals in on time this year. We've been working with somewhat of an earlier deadline than in past years, which is November 1st. And so we really appreciate everyone being on time with those. So just know that if we don't hear from you or if you don't hear from us, otherwise you will hear from us over the summer with your check-in, and you will hear from us in the fall as we get ready for renewals. And then we always do our annual meeting in December every year. So that's what you have to look forward to. Let's go to the next slide. This is kind of a list of conferences that we are either planning or considering attending in 2026. Some of them we've submitted proposals, but we don't know if they've been accepted yet. So this list may change, but this is to kind of give you all an idea of where we may likely show up and be over the course of the year. So if you're already planning on going to any of these conferences, we'd be happy to say hi. And also, if you want to collaborate, like Paolo was talking about, if you want to work with us and be on a panel or, present your ORCID case study or something like that, just reach out and let us know. So we're looking forward to seeing a lot of you at hopefully several events this coming year. And then on the next slide, yeah, just one final reminder to please fill out the survey. It should only take about 5 minutes, and we really do appreciate your feedback. We really do. When we get back in January, the first thing we do is we check the survey results and we kind of plan out our year and topics that we're going to discuss for the year based on the survey. And so please do fill that out. Every person's feedback is very important to us making sure that you're getting what you need out of this community. So we're looking forward to hearing from you through the survey. And I think that's it for me. And now I'll hand it over to Kayla to take us through our community awards.
Yeah, thank you, Sheila. So we've got our community awards this year for 2025. Before we get into that, I will just, as a reminder, Lyricist became an ORCID US community member last year, and we've been using the affiliation manager to push distinctions and service awards. So we're going to continue that this year. So for our awardees this year, you should hear from us either later today or tomorrow with these award and distinctions if you would like to have them added to your ORCID record. But now let's get into our award winners. So our first award is our Most Helpful Individual Award, and we'd like to congratulate Dan Dalpiaz for getting this award. So Dan is the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and he was awarded for his patience and thoughtful walkthrough of the OAuth integration process, which has assisted in the use of ORCID at another university in their use of single sign-on. So thank you, Dan, for your work with them and for your continued work with ORCID. We do have some honorable mention. We also wanted to congratulate Bob Joseph, Dee Lallmeyer, Greg Nahmeyer, and Brian Cyber. I may be pronouncing that wrong. I apologize. From the Ohio State University for their expertise and willingness to illustrate how their identity management and ORCID OAuth process works, which has provided key insight into different ways to utilize ORCID. So thank you so much to that team for their work with ORCID. Moving on to our Outreach Effort of the Year award, we have 4 winners, Southern Methodist University, Ohio State University, University of Chicago, and Washington University at St. Louis. I'll briefly go into each of these. So Southern Methodist for creating and managing ORCID pages for all of their law faculty with nearly 100% participation. That's great. Providing ORCID onboarding to new faculty and adding ORCID IDs to Library of Congress name authority records and authors wiki pages. Ohio State University for their continued outreach efforts in the form of library workshops, presentations, student groups, staffing at research fair booths, and hosting a virtual research impact challenge. University of Chicago for their co-hosting of 2 events to engage campus stakeholders, webinars introducing research support staff to ORCID, and in-person workshops. And then Washington University at St. Louis for hosting a series of virtual sessions to help researchers prepare for NIH policies and producing biannual reports on ORCID adoption for their School of Medicine. So thank you so much to all 4 of these organizations for their outreach. We do have some honorable mentions again this year. We want to congratulate University of Nevada, Las Vegas and the University of North Texas for your outreach efforts as well. So thank you all for your outreach efforts and for educating others on ORCID and for your continued amazing work. Now we do have organizational achievements. So the organizational achievement is we would like to recognize organizations who have launched custom ORCID integrations for 2025. We had 4 organizations this year who launched custom integrations. That was the American Council of Learned Societies, who connected their ORCID IDs with their applicant system and have some future plans for fellowship awards. Michigan State University, they connected ORCID ID to their university ID through their ORCID Connect system. RTI International, they are allowing users to log into their Litcoin platform with ORCID IDs, and the University of Chicago with their Globus platform, authenticating ORCID IDs there. So thank you so much to these 4 organizations for their custom integrations. And then we also would love to congratulate our volunteers for 2025. And these were all people who either joined us for presentations at conferences or presented case studies at some of our community calls and webinars. So I would like to congratulate and thank for their volunteer service, Diane Bovenkamp, Stephanie Gray, Paul Below, Nell Hardcastle, Stan Newman, Hilary Davis, Aaron Cheever, Sarah Scheib, and Neil Thacker. Thank you so much, all of you. And then again, very, very thankful for all of your help and for everyone's work this year. Thank you so much. And then, of course, everyone's favorite part, we will have our prize drawing. So I believe, Paolo, you're up first. Let me stop sharing.
Thank you, Kayla. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, hold on a minute. Here we go. All right, hopefully everyone can see my screen. Perfect. All right. So let's go ahead and spin.
So this is our prize drawing amongst the volunteers for the year.
All right. So we have Stephanie Gray from
Woo!
University of Florida. Exciting. All right. So we will reach out
Nice.
to Stephanie. Great. Thank you. And I will stop my sharing and hand it off to Sheila.
Okay. So yeah, every year we I guess we just started it a few years ago, but we do a prize drawing amongst the volunteers. And then now I will do the Wheel of Names prize drawing amongst attendees. You do have to be present to win. We have about 5 minutes left in the hour, and I might have to spin it a few times because it might land on somebody who's not here. So if it lands on you, please indicate in the chat that you are here. And actually, I can't change it right now. Okay, I'm going to do the spin. Is everybody ready? All right, let's go. Let's see who it lands on. Emily Feidelman, are you here? Emily Feidelman. Is Emily with us? I'll take that as a no. Okay, so let's spin again. Remove Emily. All right, here we go. Second chance. Kimberly Halling. Kimberly Halling, are you there?
Yeah.
You're here. Yay. Okay. So Kimberly, congrats. You won the prize spin. We will reach out to you. I've got your email address through the registration form. So we will reach out to you to get your prize to you. Very exciting. Congrats on that. All right. So that brings us to the conclusion of kind of the presentation portion of this meeting. Anyone who does have to go on and do other things with your day, you're welcome to do that. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. As always, don't hesitate to reach out to us at orcidus@lyrasis.org. Anyone who would like to stay on for another 30 minutes to chat and discuss, please stay on and we'll get into that discussion. I think we can probably go ahead and stop the recording. Thank you.